also leads me to the question of, do the Danish special forces that are currently in Greenland qualify for refugee status when,
very interesting.
when Greenland is handed to us? And will we allow them to just join the National Guard through their state partnership with the Michigan National Guard? Dave, over to you. Please do not bring that up.
How about this? We just turn them into their own special forces group. We'll call them
would rock.
We'll call them whatever, 35th Special Forces Group, and they're at a nuke.
We'll orient them
Greenland.
on the Arctic. We'll get them ready for that cold weather fight, and we will deploy them to Minnesota.
Little Arctic tab, white uniforms.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like
very
that.
blonde.
Get behind that.
No,
this is good.
The question really is Greenland going to be the 51st state or the 52nd after Venezuela? Because we're running Venezuela.
What happened to Canada? I saw the map. Canada was painted red, white, and blue.
No Trump administration wants Canada as the 51st state. It's too liberal. And I'm not saying
that's why
I'm not taking a side there. I'm just saying a Republican, conservative, whatever, conservative in quotes,
Nothing would
Trump
make
administration.
me happier than for that admin to find out that the conservatives of Canada are a little bit left of the Democrats of America.
Totally. Where are the Danes on that topic? Yeah, the Danes and the Greenlanders. With that
very far left.
With that as food for thought. With that as food for thought. Welcome back to the Goat Rodeo podcast. I'm your host Garrett Smith, joined by regular co-host Simon Kuhn, who covers down on government relations and engagement with Hill people, and Dave Caudill, resident go-to-marketeer and business leader at Reveal. All three of us, we are very excited about the docket today. I'll say straight off the top that there's a lot of positive energy around the announcement of Owen West as the forthcoming DIU director. He'll be, I think, taking the chair sometime in the next 6 to 10 weeks. He's wrapping up some work at OSD as one of the senior Doge operators for the Trump administration. He, like two of us on the podcast, is a Marine by background, combat vetted Marine by background, son of a famous author. He's an endurance athlete. He's a finance guy. He comes from the world of business. I think it's a pretty compelling pick, and I'm looking forward to good things. On as an item to flavor the conversation further, last week I had dinner with the Honorable Mike Dodd, who, as the Assistant Secretary of War for Critical Technologies and working in the Office of the Undersecretary of War for Research and Engineering, R&E, he is also the acting Deputy Director for DIU and is kind of the placeholder while the administration fills that role. He had, I think, only positive, energetic things to say about the future for DIU in reference to the forthcoming Owen West directorship, and I don't think I'm betraying any trust there. Had good conversations. I'm excited about it. Simon, how feel you?
DIU feels like the ex-girlfriend that keeps coming back into my life, where if you had asked me 6 months ago, I would have been like, doesn't matter who they pick to run it. I don't care. I've been burned. I'm tired. And then they pick Owen West. And I'm like, DIU is the best thing on the earth. We're going to crush it. Wait till you see I'm pumped. And I'm man enough to admit when I'm being negative. And I think Owen West's work in the Doge office was awesome. For those that aren't aware, you look at stuff like drone dominance.
Yep.
That's his fingerprints are all over it. And I think unlike a lot of folks, and I'm not going to name names, when people say, I'm going to go work at DOD and I'm not going to take a salary, and then you see them on the news every single day, I question your intent. Owen West is in the trenches. He's doing good work, and he's not, shouldering his way next to Hexif during the drone dominance announcement. He's cranking out good work and moving on to the next.
Can I just say, I just got to jump in. It's easy to not take a government salary when you're a successful Wall Street trader. Did Goldman Sachs for 19 years.
You said easy, like anyone can go be a successful Wall Street trader, become independent.
No. All I'm saying,
easy.
All I'm saying is it's an easy virtue signal to not take a government salary when you've got 19 years of Goldman Sachs.
But it's not a virtue signal if you don't tell anybody.
Which
was the real.
I agree with that.
That was the point. Right. He's not on the news telling you this. I just happen to know about him.
But he's also the son of a famous author. He's also a successful author and famous Marine, and is a successful author in his own right. Like, the guy's not hurting financially. That being said, kudos to him for not making hay out of that.
Going back into the grinder of public service long after he needs to.
So
not only that, Trump won. He was anti-Solik as well. So small. The Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations, Low Intensity Conflict. I mean, like he has done the thing.
10 weeks.
I am cautiously optimistic here. I'm optimistic for the same reasons you all are, because his reputation, the things that I've seen him write or say, are in line with things that we talk about all the time. The three of us do, which is, I think the sentiment is, he's like, if you can't name the buyer, the money, or the funding, and the timeline of how it's going to get adopted or get out in the field, you should not start it at all to begin with. Which I think is exactly the sort of thing that DIU needs. However, the skepticism part comes in that I don't really understand what's changed with funding authorities. Like, I understand this is now tucked up under, the CTO or R&E, but like, is Owen West enough by himself to solve this? Like, all right, now it's going to be the Department of Warfield Activities. It still feels like just a commercial intake valve.
So here's what I want to say, and I think this really speaks to a topic we talk about a lot, and my complaints of Doug Beck in his tenure at DIU, which is Doug Beck, obviously a seasoned commercial pro, but I don't think Doug Beck has nearly the experience that Owen West has of being a military mission-first focused individual with private sector experience who understands what the fight actually is. And the fight is to kneecap the bureaucracy. It's not anything else. There's no like showing up with the best tech in the world and saying, we figured it out. That doesn't solve the problem in the DoD. It is literally the fight with the bureaucracy. And I think what's interesting when you bring up, how does this change the authorities and what he's allowed to do? Nothing in the DOGE mandate leads you to drone dominance. Everything in drone dominance comes from seasoned professionals who know how to work the building, who saw the need, and just said, there's nothing that prevents me from doing this. I'm going to go do it. And that's what I think Owen West really brings to the table, is he understands the private sector and the public sector, and he has a demonstrated and historic love of fighting the bureaucracy to get shit done. Not for fanfare, just to get shit done. And that's what I'm excited about. Because I think DIU already has all the authorities and everything it needs. I think it has all the funding and support. It just needs someone who's willing to go, I hear you, but I don't care.
10 weeks.
Let's go.
So one of the challenges for the Beck directorship was that they didn't have the support of the Trump team, right? And when you don't have the political support, you're going to be even less risk tolerant than you might be otherwise. And Doug Beck, I think, was fairly risk averse. And so what I think we are getting in an Owen West directorship is recognition from the Trump team that he is on that team. He's going to have all the political insulation he needs to go out and execute, at least for the first period, unless he's really royally screwing things up. And what that actually implies is that you're going to get all this political top cover and insulation from an Owen West in the director chair. It's going to matter a lot who else is on the senior team at DIU for execution, right? So they've got, I'm going to cover some stats here, base discretionary budget of $429 million, and then a mandatory reconciliation funding block of $2 billion from the last reconciliation package. So he and the DIU are sitting on top of $2.5 billion worth of budget and funding they need to run with. And as I understand it from sources I'm looking at now, there are kind of three large focus areas for DIU and that $2.5 billion of budget. First is continue to expand on the Replicator initiative. Now, I've thrown shade at the Replicator initiative. Replicator 1, I think, was a semi-disaster. I'm distant from the internal workings of what that was, and there are arguments for and against the Replicator initiative's success or failure. Regardless, that is the vector through which Owen and the rest of the DIU team are going to be contributing to the all-domain attritable autonomous system or drone, scaling activity. And that, Dave, that might scratch your itch of commercial throughput and commercial kind of a commercial front door or whatever you called it, a valve, a pressure release valve, whatever. Another focus area, so Replicator initiative being one, and drones. Second is the Boost program, a new initiative with DIU intended, I think this was part of the 26 NDAA, to help commercial firms navigate military compliance. So it's like a compliance-oriented mechanism. And obviously, like that is the main set of hurdles: certifications, compliance, contracting, legality, all the stuff. And a lot of commercial firms need help, especially in the earlier stages need a lot of help becoming compliant and doing it fast. And the third, which is a political hot button item, is the Golden Dome initiative. So Golden Dome is likely to be partially managed or wholly managed by a DIU set of organizing principles and team members. So it's supporting space-based sensor and intercept layers of that new national-grade missile defense shield. Nowhere in there do I see some of the historically sexy hot button items that DIU has been famous for, with the exception of drones, right? Drones has been the thing. But I think there's a huge amount of ground to be made up there. SRR was like the first big thing DIU did back in DIU 1.0, 2.0 days in like 2017, 18, 19. And look where we've gotten, not very far.
10 weeks, 10 weeks, 10 weeks, 10 weeks, 10 weeks.
Great. Can't wait.
Your girlfriend's back, Simon. Your girlfriend's back. Your girlfriend's back. Dave, I think just speaking, maybe peeling back the curtain a little bit on reveal operations, we have not been all that enthusiastic about trying to work with DIU in the past. We were an initial, like right out of the gates in 2018, 2019, we had a DIU contractor. We were a subcontractor on a CSO, prototyping CSO award. But since then, we haven't really found traction there. We haven't seen it as a great way to engage with the customer set. How do you think that needs to change so that companies like ours and maybe younger companies are incentivized and motivated to work productively with DIU?
Yeah, so I think we actually are engaged with DIU at the moment, or re-engaged with DIU at the moment. The way that worked was, we did our prototyping OT. We built a successful capability. We then had the responsibility of going and finding a place to transition that capability. So we sort of graduated that capability. The first one that we did with DIU sort of graduated out of the DIU front door prototyping and innovation pipeline. And then it was time to go to, the more traditional sort of program management offices kind of places to buy and sustain that capability. Now we have another capability that is in the prototyping sort of front door stage that is going to need those credentialing, those authorities, and the test and the technology maturation and risk reduction. So we have re-engaged with DIU around that capability as a separate project to restart. So I don't think of the front door as the front door for the company. I think of it as the front door for a capability. And I think that front door can be used every time you buy, build, or partner around a new capability, which is what we intend to do.
Well, from a hater's perspective, it's often felt like there was just a giant cadre of DIU darlings. And if you are not socially connected to the DIU darling thing, you're kind of not it. So I'm hoping to have a different experience, but yeah, we'll see where it goes. I will say the last 3 months, right, I feel like we've had a lot of interesting interactions. And I also want to say that, Owen's appointment here comes with an actual pretty large amount of staff turnover. There's a pretty significant shakeup. What's old is new again. This is the fourth time that we were going to watch DIU get retooled. And maybe that's what needs to happen. It just needs to be retooled. This is what we need to be doing with these rapid innovation offices is like, hey, every few years, shake it out and rebuild it, because otherwise it's going to stagnate like, a Ricto or whoever else and just kind of fall down the layer of priorities.
This is the tiny violin, Simon, that you're going to roll your eyes over. The part that I care about, is the transition piece. And we worked with some great folks at DIU the first time around on the prototyping contract. But as it matured and as it was ready to transition or to scale, there was nobody in that office that had the understanding or the authority to transition that capability. So it becomes the responsibility of the vendor, which I'm fine with, because that's why I have a job.
Bring your own transition part. I think that's the lesson we should be telling everybody is you might even want to find a transition partner before you talk to DIU, because I find it much more interested if you have that.
Yeah, so I think I think what will change with Owen West is before award, part of the proposal process, part of the negotiation is going to be establishing, mutually agreeing on the commercialization or the transition plan before they spend a single dollar. And I think that's correct. If we build this thing and it meets the metrics, if it matches, like if it actually hits all the requirements, threshold and objective, this is where we intend to transition it, potentially even having a transition agreement in upfront. I think solves a lot of the problems.
I mean, those are the barriers that we ran into in the earlier days of Reveal and DIU. It was there was no apparent transition plan. There was no landing place on the opposite side of a prototyping OT contract. There were no requirements. There were no emerging requirements. There was no like J-Rock consideration. There was nothing. It was just, let's fund this and see where it goes, you know? And it was, that was disappointing, especially because we knew better even mid-stride in that contract.
So I think, exactly. So I think in this capability that we're, contemplating with DIU, a new DIU project, I think it is our responsibility to come to DIU with a PAE
10 weeks
transition agreement and say, you fund this project, and we already have, lined up the place with authority and funding to make it real.
That calls into question the existence of DIU to begin with. Aren't they supposed to be making that connection? Like, aren't they supposed to be eliciting from PAEs or PEOs the emerging requirements and a need for commercial solutioning, and then representing that through the CSO process, which was an invention of our friend David Rothside at DIU, right? Representing that to commercial industry as an intermediary, as an authorized intermediary with contracting authority to private industry, and then private industry response. What you're recommending is that, and I believe you because this is just how government works, but what you're recommending is that we, the private entity, establish a relationship with a PAE, PEO, or an acquisitions shop, and then we go jointly with that partner to DIU as a convenient contracting mechanism.
Yeah, I think this is an important version of one of my favorite topics, in that execution looks very different from reality, almost always. Execution looks very different from the plan, right? So you're going to see especially when you watch all these new reforms coming down the pipe. I do think that at some level, DIU thought it was going to do that and be everything to everyone. That's physically impossible. If I'm the autonomy guy at DIU, can I actually have meaningful relationships with every possible transitionable autonomy office in every service? Impossible. It can't be done. Your autonomy team would be the entirety of DIU, right? Like that's not feasible. And I think people should treat DIU as less of a one-stop, I got a DIU contract, it's going to solve all my problems, it's going to run me through. They don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the people, and most often they don't have the experience. They're flushing through employees just like everybody else is and rotating folks out. Nothing is ever going to replace the elbow grease of knowing your own end user, knowing your own customer, being involved in capabilities development and requirements writing, and then finding innovative ways for those folks to get money and get on contract and help the people who want the stuff that you sell.
10 weeks.
Well, on the topic of expectations and reality slamming, plans, the best laid plans of mice and startup operators, let's talk about some recent social media activity commentary around European defense venture-backed defense company Helsing, a German drone company that promised, the European solution to Ukrainian-style drone problems. I'll just a couple of notes here. They're worth roughly $14 billion US in latest private placement information. So that's a venture valuation. It's privately held.
10 weeks.
It's taken all kinds of venture money to include some high-profile American founder and European founder money, kind of high profile investors. And they recently received and started to fulfill a very large production order from the German military of roughly 300 million euros, which I can't do math on the fly. What is that? Like 350 million US? I mean, that's a massive freaking order, right? Like that would, at some level, that puts many of the American venture-backed defense darlings to shame. But this is in some ways the flagship European venture-backed defense prime in the making. And we've referenced this commentator before, but Kate McKenna, who is an authorized representative and at some level spokesperson for the Ukrainian government. She's a strategic consultant for the Ukrainian defense and intelligence sector. She dropped a LinkedIn post that was extremely inflammatory and I think not entirely incorrect, although at minimum it provides a good jumping off point for commentary, spicy and otherwise. But here's just a quote or two. Let's see, pulling this thing up. All right. The exquisite Western tech pipeline, from Anduril's ghosts to Stark's fireworks, it's a parade of venture-fueled visions crashing into frontline facts. Billions in valuations, summits full of asinine military technology leadership, yet the kit arrives half-baked, missing guidance, vulnerable to jamming, overpriced crap over and over and over again. And I think her point, and she is entirely at liberty to make this kind of point in a way that many of us in the safe, secure West, surrounded by the Pacific and the Atlantic buffers, we cannot make this. But she says, worse, these companies use Ukrainian lives to test their not fit for purpose tech without compensating the regiments for the resources they use or the lives they risk. Helsing appears to be patting itself on the back for, quote, iteration. And I mean, first, this is brutal, might be true. I don't know. I haven't had my hands on Helsing tech. I've never seen it in action beyond, videos that are posted. But I do think this is a problem where the hype machine that a lot of the defense technology industry, specifically the venture-backed component, the hype machine they engage to get their businesses moving and going, and then the attempt to live up to that hype by providing technology into active live operations where the consequence is life and death. It's a pretty big ethical problem from a business perspective and from just a human life perspective. Simon, you've got thoughts. I can tell your mustache is bristling. Hit it.
All right. I have so many thoughts. I'm going to start off. I am not intimately familiar with Helsing by any means. I'm just now looking at their products for the first time, if I'm being perfectly honest.
HX2 is the loitering munition that was kind of the sexy.
My major complaint is that the names of all their products are terrible. The Centaur looks nothing like a horse, has nothing to do with horses. That bothers me. Putting that aside, this is startup culture in a lot of ways, which I think is going to be a tough thing for folks to stomach. You cannot count the number of Silicon Valley apps that flared out and disappeared. Right? There's hundreds for every majorly successful massive winner. I don't know that there.
Hold on, I gotta break in. You're right. The Centaur does not look like a horse.
No,
not at all.
I was so upset that it was just a guy in a chair and not a horse at all.
Yeah, it's not even a saddle. It's guys, like a comfortable massage chair. It's not even a saddle.
Infinite number of words to choose from. Let's be better about that. That being said, I think you made an interesting assertion there, Garrett, which is there's an ethical consideration here. I don't think there is. And I think that particularly when you look at war and the way history books write it, the ethical winner is the actual winner of the war. And all of the ethical concerns we have in the middle become the price of becoming the winner. And we hand wave it all away. And this is not unique to tech development. The M16 had tons of struggles. Dave Caudle can speak about it ad nauseum. But it is a beloved platform now, right? Because it's the winner. And the winner is the winner. And eventually the winner becomes the only game in town. And
is the M16 beloved, Dave? Is it beloved? I don't know why Simon always references the M16 as some beautiful example of defense acquisitions. Anyway, sorry, Simon, I broke your flow. Keep going.
I'm speaking more just capability and just the philosophy of oh, this is unethical. Do you think unethical things don't happen in war? It happens all the time and nobody cares. And we'll forget about this and we'll move on like it was no big deal. So I don't think it's necessarily unethical for startups to do what startups do, which is make promises and swing hard and this is what they are designed to do. We have a really grandiose idea of what we can deliver. But I do think for those of us that give a shit beyond our financial bottom lines, this is the question of right now. Are we going to be here even if the business is rough, but we know lives are at stake? And I think some of us will be. I think some of us are going to long outlive this boom and bust of venture investment. A lot of us are on contract with the United States government to, raise our right hand and continue to serve, whether the tech is good or bad or otherwise.
Yep.
And I empathize because I have plenty of startups that I think are dog shit and I think are not going to be able to deliver on what they're promising. But at the same time, I don't empathize because this is the price of getting involved in startups. You let them in.
It seems to me that the ethic here, the ethical problem, if there is a problem, isn't necessarily in the private sector and the startup industry or the startup slice of the defense tech, venture-backed industry, making big promises and putting, aspirational targets out there and then reaching and trying and doing their best. I mean, this is at some level that's capitalism. I actually think the ethical problem is on the buyer and on the politicians, right? So like, there's so much political pressure to make winners for their homegrown industries, right? This is Europe, in Germany, in the Helsing case, but it's all the other. It's the long list of American defense startups that are potentially going to, define the next stage of defense primes in the West. So it's on the political energetics, and it's also on the acquisition folks who should know better than to acquire and try to field things that don't work, right? Like that's a testing and experimentation and evaluation regime that is failing, right? At some point before it gets to the front lines in Ukraine. I could be wrong about that, but Dave, go for it.
Well, there's something that I don't understand here, and like both of you have said, I am not intimately familiar with Helsing's capabilities. I haven't seen them or touched them or seen them live in action. And I could be wrong, but I think the way that I understood the story was Germany procured these systems and then donated them to the Ukrainian war, which means so you've got the Ukrainians, screaming, screaming more ammo, more ammo, more ammo, and then everybody's got their pitchforks up to go after Helsing for limitations or they're jammable or what have you. But it's hard for me to understand who the loser here is, because I think the Ukrainians would tell you, like, even if you can't tell me that it's going to be a perfect capability, I will still take it as opposed to nothing, as a donation. So the vendor gets to iterate on their products, the Ukrainians get free capabilities, and the Germans get to field test live a thing that they're contemplating spending $300 million to procure.
Or they did spend that money to procure. They got 12,000 units. Most of those, if they're actually assembled and shipped, those I think are all intended to go to Ukraine. At 12,000 units, I could be wrong.
The best time to evaluate your tech for defense was yesterday, and the worst time to do it is when you're in the middle of a very hot war that's been dragging on for years. Like, that's not an ideal position to be in.
Better late than never. Better late than never. And Dave, I think you're right to point out that who is the loser here? Like, is it the German economy where they've invested in the wartime equivalent of Solyndra, and they've lost a bunch of money, right? In an industry that is yet to be proven and whatever. But, Kate even makes this point later in her post. She says it's Catch-22 rebooted. Fund the failures to foster competition, award contracts post-catastrophe, and spin setbacks as stepping stones. In other words, like, she's defining that iterative cycle that the tech sector is famous for. And the problem is that it's being done live in actual operations rather than a less consequential environment like dating apps or whatever, right?
I mean, how often we say this, and people are living on the moon if they think they're going to get away with it. Existentialism is what drives the actual urgency of investing in defense.
Right.
And there's no amount of like, hey, folks, we need to get ready when life is good that's going to convince your democratic government to, this is the number one effort. let me shortchange social programs so that I can build drone factories just in case. Like, it's hard. It's hard to convince constituents that that's the priority.
No doubt. And yeah, I mean, that's what this industry is all about. It's responding to a need, and unfortunately we're late. But, we've said this before on this pod. It not only is it better late than never, but the United States, I think right now, is trying to figure out how to inspire, and this is true of the Germany Helsing example, how to inspire technology innovation and uptake and adoption and testing and experimentation and adjusting before we ourselves are involved with a hot war. It's almost like, yes, it's awful that the Ukrainians are paying for this conflict in lives and land and territory and economy and generations. It's awful. That being said, isn't it great for us, America, that we're not involved in a hot war and we're trying our best to learn on the fly? I'm not saying that's a moral or ethical position. I'm just saying that is the reality of what's happening right now. And we're trying to get into a wartime mindset without actually being in war, which is the existential driver for the innovation that you're talking about, Simon.
It's I don't know how you solve for that, and we particularly in defense tech right now, because the startup industry is so built on a marketing component, right? Like getting buy-in sort of with the vision of what we do, and it's fascinating watching a lot of these startup oriented and Silicon Valley oriented mindsets being put towards defense.
Yeah.
And it's slick advertising and it's marketing campaigns and we're going to build and we're going to do all this X, Y, and Z. And the defense budget went down. It just did. Like it's the appropriations bill, we're going to talk about it later, but like it did not, the top line has not yet dramatically increased. We have not really opened the aperture. We are shifting the cups around. It's deck chairs on the Titanic in a lot of ways as far as the resourcing is concerned. And it hasn't taken yet. Now, President Trump said he's going to go for $1.5 trillion. I encourage everyone to watch Congress this next year and see how close we get to 1.5 trillion. Because it's a very good example of like, they're trying to tell you it's existential, and that's existential level resources.
Well, if it plays out anything like what we've seen from the Trump administration and Trump himself making kind of big announcements and then eventually conceding at some middle ground, it'll still be an increase. Like I think he'll be,
Sure, could be.
And the United States will be better served with a significant increase. My prediction, I am no Nostradamus, and I'm bad at prognosticating. And as Yogi Berra said, it's hard to tell. It's hard to predict the future, or it's hard to make predictions, especially about the future. Is that what it is? Anyhow, I think we're going to be in excess of $1 trillion. I think that will happen. I've heard it from lots of appropriators and others that they think that's where that's headed. Dave, we're going to use that as a segue, though. Is the Army Acquisition Corps feeling the existential urge? In other words, we've seen Secretary Driscoll lean very far forward in reconfiguring the Army around a portfolio acquisition executive structure, which is a rejiggered version of the old PEO structure to organize differently, to streamline requirements, driving acquisitions. Tell us about whether that thing is actually like, and now that rubber is meeting the road, is that thing actually paying off?
Yeah, so the Army is definitely furthest along. I think the Air Force has organized 2 PAs at this point, but the Army started moving in this direction in the middle of 2025.
Yep.
We hosted folks that ended up in senior leadership out at our company headquarters, and they had just come from an office visit for one of the new offices that they would consume under their PAs. They've been working on this for 6 months or so.
And we heard about this, just not to name drop too hard, and we might decide that we want to bleep this name out, but we spoke with the DASM at ASALT, so Major General Chris Schneider, who gave us a bit of a peek into what was right around the corner for adjusting and reorganizing under this PAE structure, and that was last summer. So this has been coming for a while, and the Army, I think, deserves credit for leaning hard forward.
Yeah, and we've engaged with multiple parts of these PAEs, and even gotten intro to PAEs 101 from folks inside one of the new ones. So it is taking shape. They're definitely still trying to figure out how all this is going to work, especially the funding component. But what is pretty clear, and there's been a healthy amount of skepticism around whether or not this is going to work or actually change anything. But what's clear is the power is the requirements generation function of the modernization system is losing power, and that power is going to a PAE, deputy PAE, and their staff really looks like a lot of top-down directed requirement sort of actions or what the intent is. So, the way this used to work is the requirements folks that are sitting in Donovan Library and McGinnis Wickham Hall, and in the Army's case, or similar in the Air Force, are reading all of the strategic documentation from the U.S. military, and they're attempting to identify the gaps, and they're documenting those gaps and attempting to address them with modernization and sometimes technologies. And so the requirements generation function in this system has held a lot of power. And now those requirements folks working for a PAE, that PAE is going to say, here are my modernization priorities. You will write, you will put more detail against my priorities when you write these requirements down. But that's a pretty big change, the way that we do business, and I'm optimistic. But it also begs the question, where is the PAE getting their modernization priorities? Where are they getting their list of things they want to attack or tackle? And the answer that I've gotten to that most frequently is that they're going to get it directly from the force, from FORSCOM units, from FORSCOM commanders, which in theory makes a lot of sense. And then folks like me are attempting to map and understand who those units are that are going to have the most powerful voice, so we can go and partner with them.
So what I think is really interesting here is, like I said earlier, execution very rarely looks like the fun memo and announcements that we drafted well in advance. And I think this idea that philosophically requirements writers are going to be diminished in their power within the system is really fascinating, and probably has the most potential for like massive impact. The question becomes, how do these new PAE executives, right, that 2 or 3 star that's at the top, and his staff, how do they utilize, and what is their actual guidance to requirement writers? I.e., if the paradigm shifts around and this 3-star walks in and goes, hey, I don't care what you read in X and Y documents. Here's my priority. You write requirements to that. Do they still need to go write a 500-page requirement document? Because if the bureaucratic output is that a different person is directing you what to focus on, but the mechanics of like the lengthy requirements process don't really change. And like, to be clear, I think a lot of the folks involved in this acquisition reform process, not a small number, we're trying to kill requirements entirely. You get rid of this like lengthy bureaucratic on paper step. Like, we need to crush it. And I think my guess, my prognostication is that it's going to look different in each PAE. I think some PAEs are going to have really powerful personalities with, really storied backgrounds, and they're going to walk in that requirement shop and go, I don't care what you have to do tomorrow. I need a piece of paper that says I can buy this, and I'm going to go do it. And you're going to have others that are like, all right, fellas, tell me what we need here. And they're going to be by committee, and it's going to be collaborative and slow and maybe better at the end. I don't know. Who knows?
The PAEs are going to have to operate differently.
Yeah.
It's a different set of actions. It's a different game to buy tanks than it is to buy Microsoft Office for the force. It just is.
No way, dude. Office is a modern day tank. No question.
Very well said.
We don't have tanks in the Marine Corps, so I'm not familiar. What is that?
That's good.
Come on, that's very good.
It looks like an amphibious vehicle, but we actually don't do the water part.
It doesn't swim.
It doesn't swim. It doesn't swim. It's not a duck boat.
Yeah. All right, get me off of this. I was about to make some dark jokes about.
Get off that X, Simon. Quick.
Yeah.
Let's get off that X and jump onto a different one, which is appropriations. So NDAA passed. I've heard Simon say things like, fuck the NDAA. I think what he means by that, and I don't mean to project or anything or tell Simon how he thinks and feels, but I think what he means is that the power is actually in the appropriating. The authorizers define where we are going and what can be bought, et cetera, but the power actually lies in the dollars that are appropriated against specific line items in the budget. So, Simon, we have covered this week on week for a long time, but what's the outlook for getting FY26 appropriations done, and what's the outlook for 27?
So the power is with the appropriators if they want it, which is the scariest part about appropriators. If they really get together and throw their weight around, they can do extraordinary things. So after a year plus of not appropriating, remember, do it all at once in 30 days. It's amazing that it can all just happen in probably 4 weeks of prep and 4 weeks of legislating, and yet we couldn't do it back in September. So what's going on right now? The Senate is in recess. For those of you that aren't aware, the Senate's voting on nothing right now because there is no deadline for shutting down half the government, apparently. But Senate's in recess. There is 2 bills that passed the House last week to fund, the foreign operations of financial services, and there is 4 bills pending in front of the House this week, and that's DOD, that's HHS, that's transportation, and then it is DHS. If those 4 bills pass the House, next week the Senate takes up all 6 bills and potentially funds the entire government before deadline. What's happening in the House is more complicated than that, though, and I think it's going to be an interesting, kind of tough watch. What we originally saw this week was, all 4 bills are released. It's a consolidated appropriations package. We call it a minibus. All 4 are jammed together in one package, and you kind of dare people to vote no. If I want to vote no on defense, that means I'm voting no on HHS. If I want to vote no on DHS, that means I'm voting no on HHS. So you get into these fights. DHS is a political hot button. I don't need to go into the details of why. I think anyone who's got a cell phone or a television knows exactly why DHS is a divisive political issue right now. And I honestly, I originally thought it made a lot of sense to attach the DHS bill to all of the others because I think it's going to be hard to pass it. but they blinked. They're breaking it out. So we're gonna vote twice in the House this week. Once for DOD, Health and Human Services, Transportation, and then a separate vote for the Department of Homeland Security's standalone bill by itself. I think that it's going to be very hard to pass that DHS bill, but I think that bodes well for the other funding bills. And obviously the one we care about most here is the DOD bill. DOD bill is about $8 billion more than what the Trump admin requested. They still fell, there were a lot of promises at the beginning of this year that we were going to break $1 trillion with reconciliation. A lot of that reconciliation funding kind of disappeared to go pay the troops during the shutdown. So we fell well short of $1 trillion this year, but we still ended up with a slightly larger top line than what the Trump admin originally requested. It's not much more than inflation. Obviously, inflation's been pretty rough, so it's an effectively flat budget that's coming across. It's going to get dicey. There's not enough members in the House to pass this. It's going to get tricky. You're seeing right now Johnson talking about trying to get members to fly back for Thursday votes. The Freedom Caucus folks are already putting out press. Hey, we're digging through all the earmarks. We're looking very carefully. They're looking for reasons to vote no, which is always a bad place to be. But right now they haven't found anything. And this is why members complain about these big bills. You're talking about 3,000 pages of text, and they're going to try to review it in about 48 hours to find something that they don't like. And then they'll just stop. I found the thing I don't like, I'm voting no on the whole package. So we're on a real knife's edge, I think, for the margins of this vote. And that's why I think they blinked and took DHS out, because I think the Democrats almost uniformly vote no on DHS. There's been some quotes out of the party saying we wanted to see more guardrails on how ICE operates, and that's not in the bill, so we're not going to vote yes to fund it because there's $10 billion for ICE in this package.
And one of the near horizon big risks is January 30, we go into shutdown.
Yeah.
If we don't have, a complete set of appropriation bills, or if we don't go into a full year CR or a short-term CR. Is that right, Simon?
So yeah, but it's the ones we've already passed don't shut down. So anything that moves forward,
6 of 12, in other words. Yep.
Right. Exactly. And so it's going to be a less painful shutdown. I also think it'll probably be a lot shorter. I think the only shutdown would normally be a really big lever to force people to want to negotiate. But DOD and HHS are kind of the only two that I think really force people to the table for their obvious impacts on the healthcare system and just the sheer number of federal employees that work for DOD. Either one of those shutting down can have like pretty bad paralyzing effects. You could also make a case for DHS because that's where Customs and Border is, and there's a ton of commerce implications for that. So the shutdown will be much less painful than we experienced earlier this year. But I also think it's going to be much less long. There's a very clear, at least in the appropriator side, desire to get up and solve this problem now. It's been an extraordinary effort by the appropriators, and they are walking a very delicate tightrope. It's been impressive. I would love to see. I hope they carry this energy into the new year, and we see some FY27 appropriations bills in June and July that can pass the House and the Senate instead of waiting another 7 months beyond their deadlines.
I'm sorry to say, Dave, that in the event that we do have a shutdown that implicates DOD, we're going to have yet another, furloughed acquisitions workforce, right? 400,000 government civilians out of DOD furloughed, military personnel like you and me, or in our temporary capacities, or our part-time capacities, or our active duty counterparts. They're going to be working, essential personnel. They just won't receive paychecks until after the shutdown lifts. And yes, I hope that shutdown is short in the event that it happens, but we're looking at that potential reality, yet another hiccup, speed bump, call it what you will, on contracting activities, which severely handicapped a lot of folks in the smaller, non-traditional contractor end of our ecosystem late last year with a record length shutdown. How are we preparing for that, and how do we recommend that other companies like us prepare?
Yeah, so the whole thing is terrifying, and the answer is terrifying.
Yet again.
Yet again. I think the answer is similar to the last couple of times that we've been in this situation. You've asked me that question, which is, we're in the office. collaborating with the customer and over communicating is the short version.
Yeah.
What we're asking for is extensions or expansions of existing work, and to your money, and trying to understand what the implications of a CR are going to be to that office, what potential work or projects would be stalled or halted. And the answer is the same: over communicate and collaborate with your customer. And I think your point about like the uniformed service members still going to work and not getting paid, I think we've actually built a lot of goodwill with our customers in these situations where we are still showing up, we are still working, we are still maturing technology and providing value, even when the United States government isn't at work. So that when it comes back to work, we've made progress, and I think they see us as very credible partners in that way.
Yeah.
And obviously, like, obviously with increased European defense spending, as always, it features to, hedge your bet and put more chips and resources in the international market as well.
Yeah, that all makes sense to me. And I think people would be well served by heeding your repeated, seemingly perennial, every other month, giving that kind of an advice plug. So, Simon, you made reference to FY27 appropriations, just so that we don't lose that thread. Despite all the other stuff going on with the FY26 appropriations package and the minibuses and looming government shutdown, the 27 appropriations cycle is underway, right? I mean, like, offices are about to be receiving requests. We're going to go into a springtime, end of Q1, early Q2 of the calendar year, where appropriations activities and committees are fashioning the FY27 legislation. What do we need to be thinking about at our piece of the industry?
So we're not underway yet. The Approps Committee needs to push guidance to the personal offices, and they're not going to do that until they're done fixing 26.
The reason I say we're underway is because internal at Reveal, we are thinking about what we're going to do, and so it feels like it's always underway.
We are underway. I was underway in September, baby. Like,
totally.
Yeah, this is not it's not amateur hour over here. Yeah, I would encourage all, if you're a business and you're thinking about getting into the appropriations, requesting space, and you haven't already been thinking about it, I encourage you to do it 3 months ago. Let's go. Get up and run.
Yep.
But offices, you'll see House side offices are going to open up their NDAA forms first, because the NDAA for FY26 is done. House will go first, and they will go first on NDAA. I do think Approps will be not long after, so I expect offices to probably open up their appropriations forms sometime in February. Every office is different. If you already have an idea of where you're going to go, reach out and ask them what their deadlines are. Everyone has different deadlines, particularly when the Approps committees have not given them committee deadlines yet. So they're going to pick their own. We're supposed to get a president's budget request the first Monday in February. I do not think that's going to happen. So we're going to make up our own dates until that thing shows up, which is what we did last year. The House appropriated in its entirety last year for DOD without a budget request.
Right.
And then they had to drastically rewrite the bill. Stuff was on the wrong lines. Lines change, tables change. So the House just said, fuck it, we're going to do what we did last year. And the Senate said, thank you for this. We have to redo all of these lines now. But it was a no-win situation. It was either sit on your hands or do something.
Yeah. So, Simon, can I ask you for another prediction here?
Yeah, I love to predict. Someone should go back and check all these episodes for my average, because I'm willing to bet it's less than half, but it's been fun.
Hey, dude, batting 500, that's like superstar, legendary, Hall of Fame level. So You're good. I think you're good.
So Simon, Reveal's got mature capabilities that have graduated out of this sort of SBIR type of pipeline, but we also have new capabilities that are squarely in the SBIR funding and authorization game. Do you have a prediction on SBIR reauthorization?
My prediction, I was hoping to see SBIR authorization in the Defense Appropriations bill. It's not there, but there is a provision funding the SBIR program in the Defense Appropriations bill. So they've acknowledged. I have a little bit of some lack of clarity. I wonder if the appropriator is saying, hey, we're funding this program, by default means it's authorized. You could make that legal interpretation, and we often do when it comes to procurement. Like if the NDAA says we're buying 10 and the appropriators say we're buying 15, you buy 15. Like that's what happens. That's the law of the land. So the authorizers have not reauthorized SBIR, but the appropriators have said we're going to pay for SBIR. It's a fascinating little twinge there. I would be shocked if SBIR gets to move as a standalone. And I have long felt this way. It's pretty rare for these types of bills to get to move as a standalone. If they do, they tend to move by unanimous consent. And the two like competing parties on Sibber Rioff, Senator Markey and Senator Ernst, don't agree. So they won't allow either the other side to do a unanimous consent. So my guess, if we don't move something, it might slip all the way to NDAA, which could be 6-7 months before, we do an NDAA. Normally you finish NDAA in the summer, like it goes into law. This last year, we didn't finish until December. So we're in like a potentially really painful space. Now it might become so painful that it gets a swing at a standalone, but I think they've really boxed themselves out mechanically. It's hard to get time on the House and Senate floor for a small business program for DOD. Again, constituents, when we're not at war, don't really care about these things. You're not getting big wins aside from the companies that are competing for the money. So it's going to be tricky. I'm not sure. The short answer, Simon's prediction for Sibber, I think NDAA.
Well, I don't like that. So if you could shake your crystal ball, your magic 8 ball, and give it, make it give you a different answer, I'd appreciate it.
Again, I encourage everyone who's listening that cares about this to reach out to your congressman and senator and ask them what their prediction is for Sibber Rioff and tell them why it matters to you. This is the best mechanism to like engage and move the needle for folks. And, everybody's represented by somebody. So that's what we'll be doing. We'll be going to the Hill to talk about this for sure. It will be a part of my Q1 Hill engagement strategy.
Well, I'm going to predict a couple of things, Simon. I think you're going to have me in DC far more this year than I had originally thought.
Hey, good year for it. The weather's great.
And
this weekend.
Is it good?
Historic snowstorm. We're all gonna die. I'm gonna go to Michigan to get warm.
At least somebody got snow. I'm sitting here in Bozeman waiting for the snow, and it's a late winter. It's a late winter.
You are more than welcome to borrow some of ours.
I'll take it. Ship it over, man. Ship it over. I could use a bit. Okay, well, guys, I think we covered the bases pretty thoroughly. Not only did we talk Greenland as the 51st or 52nd state, and the transition of the Danish Special Forces into the 32nd Special Forces Group within the USASOC umbrella. We also talked about Helsing, Ukraine, defense innovation, live conflict. We talked about how the Army's doing stuff with its PEOs and PAEs and leaning forward. And we talked NDAA, the lesser of the two big bills, and the defense appropriations bill, the greater of the two cyclical bills that we encounter. And I think we did it with verve and humor and wit. And I'm thankful to be back in the saddle this year. Thanks, guys. We'll see you.